John here from Great Lakes Country. You know, I do a fair amount of Dutch oven cooking, and when it comes to Dutch oven cooking the proper way, you really need some kind of stand or trivet to set the Dutch oven on top of so you can really get the appropriate amount of heat from the coals beneath it. And I've used a few different options. The Kent Rollins horseshoe style Dutch oven trivet. I've also got a commercially available foldable sort of lightweight steel Dutch oven trivet that works pretty good, but I'm not 100% happy with any of the Dutch oven trivets that I have used for one reason or another. So I've had an idea in my head for what I think would be the perfect heavy duty but simple and very inexpensive Dutch oven trivet that I could make myself. And I'm making it 100% myself out of 1/2-inch rebar. The concept's pretty simple. There are a handful of metal working steps that have to be done. None of those steps are especially difficult for somebody with really any level of experience in working with metal or welding or anything else. Anyway, in this video, I want to go through every step of showing exactly how I built this pretty simple but incredibly strong Dutch oven trivet out of this rebar. The first part I need to make is pretty much just a circle. And the challenge here will be to perfectly bend a straight piece of very rigid 1/2-inch rebar into a circle. So in order to do that, I first have to make what I guess I'll call a rebar bending form. That is, something incredibly sturdy around which I can bend a piece of rebar. I found this random part at a scrap metal place, and it's gonna work great for this purpose. I have no idea what this part was originally meant to be, but it cost me $2, and it's gonna make this whole project possible. To build this rebar form, it's pretty simple. First, I need to weld this circle thingy to a base plate. I'll mention that I am not especially great at welding, and I'm using a pretty cheap flux core welder. These two factors mean that I can't really achieve a beautifully clean and smooth looking weld, but I certainly can create a weld that is entirely strong and sufficient for my purposes. So before any of you welders out there start ripping me to pieces, I promise you I am fully aware that these welds are kinda hideous. It's something I've only recently learned how to do, and I'm working on it. Anyhow, after that circular piece is attached to the base plate, I'll flip it over and attach a short piece of angle iron to the bottom. This will just be a point onto which my bench vise can grab. Lastly, I need to attach a little lip or edge against which the rebar can anchor when I begin bending it around that curve. So using a smaller piece of angle iron, I'll just get that welded into place. Now my rebar bending form is completed and we can see how it works. So into the vise it goes, and let's get a 4-foot piece of that 1/2-inch rebar in there. I'll use a big pipe to get a better grip and some extra leverage, because this thick rebar is going to take some significant force to bend. Anyway, this is all working pretty much exactly as I'd hoped. It does take a ton of manual force to bend that thing, but I'm definitely making it happen. I added a big C-clamp and some vice grips to make sure that thing couldn't pop free as I bent this rebar tighter and tighter. With how hard I was pushing on it, it could be a disaster if that thing popped off the form in the middle of it. Two more things to mention about this rebar bending method. One, no matter how much I bend it, it still has a slight amount of spring to it. That is, it doesn't want to stay tight against that circular form. I can get it very close to perfectly round, but it will end up slightly bigger in diameter than that form. This is actually ideal because the form is a little on the small side for what I wanted to make. The 8-inch form ended up producing a 10.5-inch circle. And two, it's pretty impossible to get the very ends of that rebar bent around the form in this way. So the way I achieved a complete circle was to bend past the starting point until I had just the early stages of a coil. At which point I can just cut across the rebar with an angle grinder where those two pieces perfectly intersect, and I'll have myself a circle. So I'll clamp it tight together and just zip through it with the cutting disc. Now I will have to bend this whole thing slightly to get the two ends to meet up. But before I do this, I'm going to take the grinder and just taper down those hard corners first. Tapering the ends of the rebar just slightly will give me some more surface area to weld, and that weld will end up appearing more level with the rebar itself, rather than building up a big clunky looking seam. Anyway, to get those two ends lined up and touching, I don't really have a better way than some regular old brute force. I could build a sort of bending tool out of some more rebar, but I made this work. A long carpenter's clamp helped push that circle together the rest of the way, and now I can weld that joint and complete this circle. I don't really like welding indoors, but I don't currently have a vise on my outdoor welding table, so for this particular joint, I'll just do it here in the workshop. And after cleaning up that weld with the wire wheel, it's not looking bad at all. Now this circle is complete and we can move on to the next step. For the top surface that I'll be setting Dutch ovens of various sizes on, I can't just have an empty circle. So we need to add in some sort of inner support frame. The simplest and strongest way I could think to do this would be to join two L shapes together such that they form the shape of a cross. I'll do this by first bending two pieces of rebar to right angles, making them slightly longer than what I'm sure I will actually need. Because once I've connected the two L pieces together, I can lay them across the circle and mark exactly where to cut each end so it fits perfectly inside. But before I weld the two L's together, I'll grind down the outside corner on each one just a little. Just enough to make a small amount of flat surface so those two pieces can join together nice and solid and flat. Then I'll weld them together into my X shape. Once I have that X, I can now place it over the circle, take some measurements so I'm sure that it's exactly centered, and I'll mark each end where I need to cut. Zip off the excess from each end with the cutting disc, lightly taper each of those ends with the bench grinder, and now my X perfectly fits into the circle, and I can weld each of those four ends into place. Now the last part we have to make are the legs. This will be a tripod style trivet, so I need 3 of them. I'm going for 8-inch tall legs, so I will just bend a right angle into a length of rebar at the 8-inch mark. Then measure and cut the excess so I have a 4-inch foot. I could have probably gone shorter on the foot, but I'll be placing large, heavy Dutch ovens on this, so I want a pretty wide, sturdy base. Then I'll just repeat this 2 more times, and we're ready to weld. Attaching these legs was the trickiest part of this whole build because I need to make sure that they are perfectly straight and also make sure the foot is facing outward at the proper angle. I used this little post level that straps to the rebar, and it allowed me to ensure that the leg is perfectly straight up and down. This was pretty tricky to do with only 2 hands, and if I was going to make a bunch of these things, I'd certainly build some sort of jig that would hold the legs perfectly in place while I got the weld started, but I made this work nonetheless. As for making sure the 3 legs are spaced perfectly apart around that circle, I made a quick template on the computer and printed it out. A circle with a triangle in it shows me exactly where to place each leg. Though in hindsight, I should have just made a mark with a Sharpie and then removed the paper because, well, it turns out that if something is hot enough to melt metal, it's also hot enough to catch paper on fire. But it doesn't really matter, so oh well. And now this trivet is nearly completed. The last thing I'll do is give it hell with the wire wheel to clean up all the slag from all those welds and get this whole thing looking clean and shiny. Now my Dutch oven trivet is complete. It's incredibly sturdy and, to pat myself on the back a little, looks absolutely terrific. And just for the heck of it, how about a quick demonstration to show that this trivet is more than capable of supporting a Dutch oven filled with food. Anyway, I think a real trial run is in order. I wanted to make this trivet such that it would hold Dutch ovens of any size, from my adorable little 4-quart all the way up to my 12-quart Goliath. In both cases, this trivet worked perfectly. It really only has one job to do: hold the Dutch oven up off the ground. And it does that perfectly. No moving parts, no flimsy welds, no unnecessarily heavy horseshoes. Just a simple and durable piece of rustic perfection that I'll likely never need to replace. So there you have it. Super sturdy, super strong, really inexpensive, especially considering that you can often find scrap rebar for free on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or probably all sorts of other places. I bought this rebar brand new from Lowe's, and I think the 3 pieces I need totaled up to about $13. I'm sure this thing will outlive me, and I'm pretty happy with the height that I made it for a lot of the Dutch oven cooking that I do. It is kind of tall, so I'm already thinking I'm going to make a second one that has legs that are probably about half as long. Anyway, that's about it. Be sure to like and subscribe and stay up to date with all our latest stuff, including future DIY and Dutch oven cooking videos. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'm John, and this is Great Lakes Country.